Welcome back to the Fire Drill. On this week's episode, Matt Ginella joined us. So it was Michael, Alan, myself, and Matt. And we started off a conversation and really talked a lot about Vijay, and it really went a lot of places like the Fire Drill is supposed to do, places that I didn't expect. Matt tells some stories about a photo shoot. We obviously talk deer antler spray because you can't talk Vijay without deer antler spray. Who knew? I didn't know that you put it under your tongue, but I learned that today. But we talked a lot about his career and good things, bad things. It was really very interesting. One of those moments when I'm on this podcast that I kind of sit back and try to listen because there's great stories from guys who have had firsthand experience, Alan and Michael and Matt with him. So it was great. Talked about PNC, obviously, and Tiger and Charlie and just all the things that come with it. Tiger as a father, Tiger's place in the game, Charlie's place in the game, that we all need to chill the F out about like everything that Charlie does. We don't need to be that into Charlie. There can be a level of interest without a stalker situation. And then lastly, we talked about OWGR. Matt had put out a tweet a little bit ago, maybe last week, that kind of went a little bit sideways at times. And he came on to kind of explain his thoughts, and we all joined in about OWGR and what it looks like in the future. So it was a great debate, 4 of us instead of 3 this week. Before we get into the actual podcast, obviously want to thank our 2 great sponsors that help us do this. Dormy Workshop, awesome head covers, artisanal, got to use that word every week. Great club covers, putter covers, head covers, awesome stuff. Appreciate their support. And Par Points, go make par. Awesome way to a different and awesome way to keep score on the golf course. I know it's hard to break out of something that you're used to, but please go try it because it really is a very cool way to go score. Par Points is great and a great supporter of us. And then lastly, new podcast that Fire Pit is doing, Need a Fourth. Awesome guest with a famous putter, gentle fella. He well worth your time. Going to be an awesome one. A great guest coming up. We just talked off air per se about upcoming guests for this show, and it is very, very cool. So all of that being said, go to our YouTube page, subscribe, all those annoying things that people ask you to do all the time and you don't listen to them. Please do that. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast, comment, do all the things, and then I'll stop saying that. The more you do that, the less I'll say it, and we can all just move on with our lives. So we put out a lot of great content, podcasts and shows and all sorts of stuff. So go check that out at the Fire Pit Collective YouTube channel. These podcasts are on there also. And without further ado, here's the 4 of us this week talking golf.
Hello and welcome back to the Fire Drill podcast. This is Alan Shipnuck. I am joined by Michael Bamberger and Ryan French, as always, and we have our colleague Matt Ginella, who wanted to come on. He was under some bridges battling various trolls and thought we'd have a more thoughtful discussion about the topic at hand, which was the world rankings and whether or not the Fire Pit Collective is a shill for live golf. But we will start with the event of the day. I mean, it's a goat factory out here. We started with Lionel Messi winning the World Cup. Then we roll into Tiger and Annika playing at the parent and son. You can't call it the father son if Annika's there. And of course, we got Tom Brady playing football later today. It's quite a sports day. This is not a soccer podcast, so we don't have to go deep on that. But Tiger and Charlie did not make a run. They're both a little banged up, but it was fun to see them out there. I loved watching Vijay Singh bring it home with his son. I remember when his son Cass was like an early teenager. Now the dude's in his 30s, and they finally won it for the first time after 2 decades. And it was just fun to watch Vijay do his thing. But obviously, all eyes were on Tiger and Charlie. What did you guys think of how the Woodses performed?
I think, first of all, that the PGA Tour, if they could have picked a worse storyline to happen, I'm not sure Vijay and his son winning. I mean, they're they're having no fun. They're like in full grind mode, like typical Singhs out there. Like Vijay is full grind. I tweeted like they probably went to the range after they won and like pounded balls for a while. Like it was full grind mode. It was like, but I mean, it was great to see the Woods. I love the dailies, but of all storylines that could have happened, the Singhs probably was not on the top of the PGA Tour's list.
I don't agree, and Alan already knows why. Vijay is always sticking it to the man, and anytime he wins, he's sticking it some more, and I like it.
Yeah, does Vijay's career money list include the settlement he earned from the PGA Tour from the deer antler spray, suspension, non-suspension? I mean, that probably bumps him up a couple notches. Matt, what was your take?
I'm sort of with Michael. I think is Vijay my favorite player that I've ever met or spent time with or worked with. Everybody has their own. What our opinions of like players always comes down to like our own experiences, right? And I have one terrible story about Vijay Singh and how he treated a photographer at Golf Digest, Steve Zerley, who is a lifetime committed member of the world of golf media and has tirelessly covered this game for better part of 4 decades. And Vijay really treated him poorly on a Golf Digest cover shoot. And that always stuck with me. Like, I can't forgive him for it. Like, I just can't, and I've heard that Vijay's actually a decent dude. If you're in the inner circle, it's a little bit like Tiger, the way he treats the inner circle. If you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. I just have that one story that always lives with me on how he treated a guy like Steve Zerley who didn't deserve it.
One of the best people ever. But Matt, you got to tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean, come on, give it up.
Oh, well, it was a Golf Digest cover shoot. I was the director of photography. So I'm coordinating with the agent on the front end. Hey, here's where they're meeting. Here's where it's going to be. It was practice round of a tour event. Say it was a Tuesday before an event, and he was going to give Zerley some time. And again, a cover shoot. And Zerley's request to me to communicate to the agent was, hey, given Vijay's, specific color of his skin and how dark he is, and in trying to make the cover shoot look as good as it could be without without adding any light, because we were doing it outside. He wanted to do it outside during the practice round. The request was no, black or white visors, no black or white shirt, because that contrast was going to be really hard to make look good on a cover shoot. So it was like, hey, can you just bring different color shirts or visors? And at the end of the round where he was going to go change and get, he came out with a white shirt and a black visor. And Steve was like, hey man, any chance we can get, I thought we communicated that this is going to make it really hard with this light to try to get light, no, this is what I'm wearing. Okay. Well, you do see that we're trying to make this as good as possible. This is what I'm wearing, but if there's any chance, okay, how about this? What if we do the cover shoot without the visor, and on the inside for the swing sequence that was generally tied to a cover shoot, you can wear the visor inside. He goes, hey man, I make more for this wearing this visor than you will in your entire career. I'm wearing the visor, drop that line. I'm wearing the visor. This is what I'm wearing. And that's what we're doing. And, at that point, Steve's just trying to make it look, it had been cute again on the front. Like that to me is just being a dick, right? At that point, that's like using the line, like, do you know who I am? Like if you're dropping those kinds of lines, I can make more for this than what, and then it's the whole thing that just, and I think, and we're just trying to make them look good, right? Everybody's got, in theory, the same goal, which is to try to make him, so I don't know.
I'm not sure there's another player out there where there's as big a gap between how the players feel about him and how the fans and media feel about him, because most of the players really like Vijay, partly because he's like he was forever was the de facto swing coach on tour. Like if guys were struggling, they'd go talk to Vijay. He was so knowledgeable and he was generous with his time, and you'd see him working with different players, and he'd be on the practice green, sharing his little weird putting aids. And I think there's actually a lot of Vijay loyalists. They like that he stood up to Tiger, he stood up to Phil. They famously went jaw to jaw in the champions locker room at the Masters, Vijay and Phil, and there was no love lost between Vijay and Tiger. And I think players appreciated that while everyone else was retreating, Vijay wasn't afraid of Tiger, and he got the better of him a few times during peak Tiger era. So Vijay, I think, has a lot of respect among his peers. But yeah, the fans have never warmed up to him. He's never been a favorite among the typing class. So it's fascinating. I don't think Vijay's too bothered by any of that. As you said, he's got all the money in the world and he's got the trophies, and he does DGAF, which on some levels kind of I respect.
I certainly respect him. I when I first joined Morning Drive now 10 years ago, it was right around the time of the deer antler spray incident. And I was kind of bewildered by the idea that a guy of Vijay's stature and all that, and where they were with the game would put something like deer antler spray under his tongue without running it by a few people just to make sure that that the contents of it weren't going to come up as, something that the tour was, banned as a substance. It was like, really, we're going to go with deer antler spray and just like, just without running it by a few people. I mean, I kind of like poked at him for that, and I don't think he appreciated it. But I've had a couple. I've crossed paths with them from time to time. Certainly, the Pure Insurance, where the Champions Tour. I love that event, and he's been nice to me. But that story about how he treated Steve and what he said to Steve, and as a director of photography, and in the camp of photographers, and knowing how selfless and behind the scenes they are, and what they go through to carry that equipment and get into position and try to make the players look good in shoots like that. It's like that just seemed unnecessary and dickish to me.
Right. Well, and the opposite of that is in the early SI days, photographers told Arnold Palmer, "Hey, wear a red sweater. It'll look great on the cover." And Arnie showed up in a red sweater. He got it. It's showbiz.
Yeah. Yellows, reds, contrasting like colors. It's
like the Queen always wears those bright colors so you could spot her in a crowd. It's kind of the same principle applies. What were you going to say a minute ago, Michael?
No, I was going to ask Ryan if he ever actually used deer antler spray.
Yeah, always.
He may be our only hunter in this foursome. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't see ships that can be doing a lot of hunting. Matt, I don't know about. Have you? Is it basically a urine? What? I
don't even know.
I don't even know what it is.
There was a GNC right near the entrance to that stadium course, whatever they call it, TPC Sawgrass. And Vijay's, back in the day when Vijay was just getting bigger and stronger and hitting, literally 500 balls a day, he would just go there and point at stuff. And, they would take it down off their shelves and he'd go out there with their shopping cart. And so I think he was, to your question, Matt, I think he was pretty indiscriminate.
I did have a funny thing where I was at a bookstore in Augusta, Georgia, the week of the Masters. There's just the Barnes & Noble there. I think off of Bobby Jones Expressway, actually. And Vijay was wandering around. And so I was like, oh, cool. So I kind of like low-key stalked him to see what he was going to buy. I was hoping it might be some erotica or something. But he went right to the sports section and he was flipping through the golf books. And he wound up buying like 3 books. Sadly, it wasn't mine or yours, Michael. But it was interesting. Like he really looked at the books with some care, and he read the back flaps I think it was a Hogan biography, if I remember correctly, and it was a kind of a coffee table book about like the great holes of golf, and I just thought it was kind of cool. Like Augusta's a little boring during Masters Week, and there he was, just walking around the bookstore.
No, it just so happens though. So when I caddied on the European Tour in '91, he played a lot of practice for a golfer named Peter Teravainen. Vijay played a lot of rounds of golf with Peter, practice rounds and tournament rounds. So I got to know Vijay then, and to the point we're all making, he's always been, quote, nice to me, except for when he's treated me like absolute dirt. So that's happened too. But anyway, we may be overdoing it on Vijay, but I think it's astounding how good his swing was today. I've seen him swing poorly in the past few years. Like, it didn't have the speed that it had now, but he looks strong. Looks the same, really.
And supple. I mean, such a long swing. I mean, it's just... It's one of my favorite swings ever. And it's funny, we probably all have like certain swings burned into our brains that we got to watch up close. One of the most majestic golf swings I've ever seen was at Whistling Straits when Singh won that PGA. And it was in the playoff. They went to the 17th hole, that long par 3. And he was just kind of on the left side of the tee box. I was on this little hill above it. He's just framed by the lake. And he hit, it was just the most beautiful swinging I've ever seen. And he just held the finish for so long. I said, I don't know where that ball's going, but that's the best golf swing I've ever seen in my entire life. And of course, he hit it stiff. And that was kind of the key to winning that playoff and winning that PGA championship. But like, that is just burned into my memory. It was so majestic. And it just like the arc of the club, it looked like it traveled about 20 feet, and the rhythm and the grace and the power. I mean, peak Vijay was absolutely incredible.
Absolutely agree.
For someone
without great putting.
I was just gonna say that for a mediocre putter to win 9 times, knock Tiger from number 1, win the PGA, like, and don't forget that 63 he dropped on Tiger in Boston to take over number 1 that year. That they're playing together. That's one of the all-time great head-to-head rounds. So, yeah, it was kind of fun to think about Vijay. I hadn't thought about him in a long time, but this is a Vijay appreciation podcast. Apparently,
Matt was his guy. Not Darren Clark. Clark Jones. Was that his agent back then?
At the time, yeah. And spent a lot of, had a lot of, and Sergio Garcia, Clark Jones was Sergio Garcia. Yeah. Did a lot of work with Clark at that time, and BJ was tricky. They all have their own little quirks about them. I got a ton of stories because those photo shoots lent themselves to a lot of great anecdotal stuff. But I will say, just to go back to the event itself, and I know, Michael, you're gonna write about it, but boy, if this isn't the best, if Tiger as a father isn't the best version of Tiger, I mean, clearly he's an elite competitor, and 82-15, that we're never going to see that again. But this vulnerability, the vulnerable Tiger that talks about what his kids meant to him in his recovery and what they said to him and how it mattered, and all that, him sort of on the verge of emotions in an interview. I mean, that is, to me, and again, we all have our own incidents or anecdotes about Tiger himself, but it's just the best Tiger. It's the Tiger that, for me as a dad now, I started early with Tiger as a photo editor at Sports Illustrated. I was on shoots with him. He was really socially awkward. He was stiff. He's rigid. His jokes only were funny to the people, that sort of were in his, paid or on salary. There was a lot of awkwardness about him. But boy, this version of him, when he's willing to sort of have these open conversations about being a father and watching him interact with his son, not unlike what we watched when Earl interacted with a young Tiger, it's just that's the most compelling aspect of where we're at with Tiger by far for me. And I like seeing it in other fathers and sons, or I even like, Nelly to me is incredible and worth all the hype and the attention as it relates to her swing and her conviction and personality and competitive nature. I can't wait to see where she goes. But anyway, just a mashup of all of that this week was really, really cool stuff.
I said it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Tiger, is, I like Tiger more after the scandal, if that makes sense, because I think he's grown as a person, and this week kind of sums that up. Like, he was a flawed human, still a flawed human, but has grown, and only his kids and his girlfriend and people around him will be the judge of what kind of person he is. And it seems from the outside that he's a great father, and I think that's, at the end of the day, all that matters. Quick note on the parent-child. I know this will never happen because Charlie Woods will grow up and Tiger and Charlie will play forever. But it should be either you have to play with your father or you have to play with a kid who's under 15, right? Like, I don't know if Vijay and his former pro son is that a great of a story. I mean, the guy used to play on the European tour. So I don't know. There should just be an age limit on the kid part of it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But like you said, Matt, I mean, Tiger hit a couple electric shots during the first round, like that long pitch off the pine straw. That was so vintage. But the most memorable thing I think he did across 2 days of competition was they were the post round press conferences, and seen that softer side and seen that chemistry. And we just started to hear Charlie's voice, right? Like, they've kind of slowly been unveiling him to the world. And so it's fun to hear Charlie talk about his dad. And it really, I would say, for all the Nike ads and all the Buick ads, you name it, this has been the single best brand building exercise there is for Tiger. Not to be cynical about it, but I mean, because it clearly comes from the heart. But to see a softer side of Tiger and that we can all relate to that. I watch my daughter play basketball and my heart's like just bursting. And, we all have competed alongside kids or parents or whatever it is. So to imagine how special that feels for them. It's really, it's cool that Tiger lets it out. He's not trying to hide it. He's not trying to make it anything other than what it is, which is a really special part of his life and his career. And I think other than maybe the Masters and the Open, I think this is probably the most meaningful week of the year for Tiger. And that's cool.
The other thing is it's another feather in the cap of the game of golf. And Jordan made that comment about how in the locker room, you've got these kids and these grizzled legends, in the same competitive locker room. But having played in the Car Golf's father-son at Waterville for years now, and then the father-daughter as well, and watching, these titans of industry, whether it's Dermot Desmond or JP McManus, or there's been Dan Marino or Wayne Gretzky or all these, Jeff Yang has played it. There's so many people who have showed up in Waterville and competed in this event from all different sort of walks of life. And that the game is that great equalizer that sort of levels the ego playing field out a bit. And you watch fathers who aren't as good as their sons or as they're good as their daughters, and you watch them. It's just the best version. It just brings out the best in people. I think it's when you start mixing generational stuff up around this competitive landscape, it tends to, I don't know, this is a good reason why we look forward to this event. It's why we look forward to events that involve either our fathers or our sons or daughters, or we watch, I don't know. There's something about that and the game that no other sport really is able to accomplish. And so that in itself also deserves to be noted, in my opinion.
It's well said. And just a quick note on Tiger's other child, his everyone knows he's got an older daughter, Sam, and I think she's shy by nature. We've all seen her around a little bit. The son Charlie is kind of a ham and outgoing, and that's delightful, but she's just a different personality. But at the Hall of Fame induction where she introduced her father, she was so poised and so intelligent and funny and insightful. And it's neat. I don't think any of us would ever want to trade places with Tiger Woods. I mean, I know we all take being fathers very seriously ourselves. Ryan is Tiger's age and has, like Tiger, a son and a daughter. And, we have the advantage of raising our children in anonymity. And it's a much, much, much better way to grow up. Tiger, of course, doesn't have that, and those kids won't have that. So there are challenges. We can never really understand it, but to see, and we just see little glimpses, but to see glimpses of these kids that seem to be very well-adjusted, happy, intelligent, caring kids, it really is a great tribute to Tiger. Because I think of Tiger as I like to think that I have a lot of empathy for Tiger. And in my mind, and I wouldn't say this of Jack or Arnold and various others, I think he's had a very, very trying, difficult life. So I think it speaks very well for Tiger, and definitely for Elin as well, to see these kids coming out when they do make these public appearances, as they do.
And I think Elin deserves some credit too, right? Because these kids are obviously they've got some really good balance from where we sit and what we see. They've got some pretty nice, good, head on their shoulders, so to speak. It seems to me they seem pretty well grounded and rounded. We'll see how it all evolves. But boy, I mean, that to me, considering what Tiger has been going through and has dealt with, and Tiger being Tiger, for these kids to be who they are in these situations and with microphones in front of their faces or leading the charge of their father into the World Golf Hall of Fame, it's pretty impressive. And I think she deserves a big chunk of credit for that too.
I also think that the fascination with Charlie needs to tone down a bit as a general media. Brendan Pratt said it best. The PGA Tour took a picture of his divot patterns, and Brendan's tweet underneath of it was it just said, "For fuck's sake, is divot patterns." And it's again, he's never going to be his father. It's impossible. Just let the kid live. I get the interest. I understand it. And I'm all for it for a week at a time. But let's just chill. The kid is 13 and he's the 150th best player in Florida or something. He's a very good player. He's got a great swing, but I don't think we need to take pictures of his divot pattern. Okay. Just take a breath. There's a fine line between stalking a 13-year-old and interest in Tiger Woods' kid. Let's find that.
Totally agree.
That's well said. I was explaining the interest in Charlie to someone who's not really a golf fan, and she said, "Isn't that a lot of pressure? Why is he even doing that to his son to make him play in this event?" And I said, "Well, you could try and if you're Tiger, you can try and give your kids a normal childhood, but it's impossible anyway. And especially if one of them is into golf, there's no scenario where Charlie Woods can have a normal childhood. It's just not in the realm of human existence." So I think it makes sense. They're kind of slowly introducing him to performing and obviously Tiger's doing interviews with his favorite people like Sanzi, and it's still a pretty controlled environment. And it's kind of this year by year evolution. And I don't think you can, if Charlie wants to play golf, and clearly he does, unfortunately his last name is Woods and people are going to pay attention. So I think they're doing a pretty nice job of bringing him along slowly. And it doesn't seem like he's out there grinding on the big time junior golf circuit, and he just kind of does this thing. And I think it's commendable. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but I appreciate the restraint. I'm sure Charlie could have already committed to Stanford by now if they wanted to make that announcement. But they're keeping things low key, and I think that's probably the right path forward.
Yeah, I don't think it's Tiger's fault. I think it's media. Again, most of it is the PGA Tour, and again, there just is a fine line. I understand he's your best player. I understand you got to promote him, but there's just a line. The kid's 13 years old. Let's just chill out here for a minute.
So, Matt, the reason we wanted to have you on, especially this week, and we are, I think, as this Fire Drill podcast evolves, we'll have more and more of our colleagues pop on just to keep things fresh and offer some different perspectives, which is always a great thing. But you put out a tweet about the world ranking, on the occasion of Dustin Johnson falling out of the top 40, which is obviously a joke because there's not 39 players on the planet better than Dustin, no matter how you slice it. But it created a lot of engagement, a lot of conversation. Why don't you recap your stance on the world ranking and then how things escalated from there?
Well, it was just that. I tend to shoot first and then ask questions later. But I saw a tweet out Dustin Johnson fell out of the top 40 according to the official world golf rankings, and it was well, this just the optics of this just doesn't make any sense. Dustin Johnson is Dustin Johnson. I played with him at Adair Manor. He is definitely better than 40 players roaming the planet. And if there's such a thing as the official world golf ranking, and it's not, and he's not in the top 40, there may be something, there may be a flaw in the system. And it was literally like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And then, if you do some deep dive into the official world golf ranking, and you see who's on the board, and you see the criteria, and you see that it, sort of got changed as of August, that, continues to make it more difficult for, one could argue not just the LIV Tour, but other tours to try to get points. The system may need another overhaul. And, I listened to the Fried Eggs podcast. Garrett Morrison had a statistician, Joe Lamagna, I believe is the way he pronounces his name, on, who was tremendous. It was a great podcast. And it was very informative. And, I listened to it after I made the comments, because a lot of people, it escalated because, people getting personal and then accusing us of being shills for LIV. Like that's easy to dismiss, because we're obviously not that. We are not pro, we're not pro LIV, and we're not pro tour. We're just pro truth and sensibility. That's the way I like to look at who we are. Our collection of perspectives offers just that, a collection of perspectives based on who we are, our sensibilities, and our, sort of what we want for a game that we all love. That's also at the core of who we are as a company, is a collection of people who generally love this game of golf for a wide variety of reasons. From the professional standpoint, to me, if you're going to have something called the official world golf ranking, and it's not ranking the world of competitive golf, then there's a problem with it. Now you can say, is LIV competitive? And now I think there's issues with, these are two separate conversations. What is LIV and what is their purpose? What is the official world golf ranking and what is its purpose? What is the PGA Tour, and what role does the tour have in controlling all of this? And then there's extensions to that I have issue with, and the tour's control over media and the narrative around the sport, the lack of transparency around the game. We don't find out why people get fined or suspended. All of that. There's a lot to unpack. And so, as it relates to the official world golf ranking, I think, and LIV, and whether or not, I think both need to move in order to make this a system that works for the greater good of the game and competitive golf. And that's just what I believe. And that, it is complicated, and it's not easy to answer or to come up with a scenario that accounts for all of this. But I think making, the criteria of having a cut 72 holes for majority events, having a weighted period, having field of 75 or more, having an open qualifying process. You can go through each one of those and argue the merits of each one of those as it relates to the official world golf ranking. But at the end of the day, out of the gates, based on who's on the board and the fact that it calls itself OWGR, official world golf ranking, and you got a bunch of really good players who are falling down that ranking system because they're not playing in an event that match those criteria. I think there's issues to take with a lot of it and all of it, and on both sides.
Yeah, well, that's a good overview. I think the strong reactions to your tweet, it's just part of a larger issue in modern life, and especially social media. Like, you have to pick a side. You have to pick a side immediately, and you have to defend it to the death, no matter what. And so it's like, when LIV has been so polarizing, I think all of us, to a large degree, are trying to play it down the middle, where we, I've said this before, I don't know if on this podcast or elsewhere, but my idea of balance is to be critical of both sides. And I think I've done that of the tour and of LIV. I've also celebrated their breakthroughs and their good ideas, but it's just like, if you don't stake out a very black and white position, it confuses people, I think. And so the fact that we're trying to see the nuance and we're trying to be balanced, almost like upsets folks because they want to know which camp you're in. Are you on my side or the other side? It's us versus them. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for subtlety and for discussion. So that was just the latest example. I think the very strong reaction to your tweet and the accusations that, we're working for Liv, which is obviously ridiculous for those who bother to listen to the podcast and read the stories and don't just live in the Twitter sphere. But
I'd love to hear Ryan's take too. I mean, I know I've heard bits and pieces of it, but as it relates to the other two, and the other thing is I generally am in the corner of the little guy, the dreamers. And that's another podcast I'm working on that's in defense of a tweet I sent out, or I was on a podcast and it got stripped out, and I'm going to do a Club Pro podcast and I'm dropping that next week. But I wanted to hear Ryan's perspective on all of this as it relates to official world golf ranking and the trickle down effect of what the new criteria is going to have on other tours beyond Liv.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys, a Liv, I think it's pretty obvious eventually needs to get it, whether they have to adjust or meet in the middle. I mean, the three of us talked, Matt, a couple weeks ago. It's like, if Cam Smith falls down Dustin is a great example, but Cam Smith nowadays is even a better example. It's like, he's going to eventually fall down the rankings. Now he just won, so on a OWGR tour, but like if he falls down, then it just becomes a joke at some point. Like, you're not better than if he falls down to 7th, the 6th ranked guy knows he's not better than Cam Smith, and it becomes a joke as it's slowly becoming. So they have to adjust. But as an overall thing, I mean, the guys on the Asian tour, guys on the European tour, and you're seeing top guys like Rahm talk about it. I mean, Travis Smith won on the Asian tour and got, I think, 4.47 points, or maybe it was Andy who won. And it's like, everyone thinks it's a joke at this point, or there's at least very big frustrations, right? Like, these guys, like Travis Smith, has tried to make it here and, hasn't got through Q school. Asian tour is a place to play. And if he plays well, he should be rewarded for it. And, with the new changes to OWGR, not giving as many points to these foreign tours, it's tough. And I think it hurts the world game in general, because maybe it was inflated over in the tour, but I mean, Tom Kim is a great example. Tom Kim became a known name because of OWGR. He got in the top 100 playing overseas and playing on the Korean tour and playing on the Asian tour and getting in the top 100 in the world, then eventually coming over here. And now he's a huge part of what the PGA Tour is doing right now. If he is facing the same points problems that the players are now, do we ever hear of Tom Kim? He would have never. It's almost impossible to get in the top 100 playing the Asian Tour right now. So, and these guys, Michael and Alan, have talked about it more. I mean, like, it was brought up to, it was made up basically. So, is there just a better explode it altogether and just find a better way, or, as Michael has said, is it just get rid of it and figure out a way to let the majors just decide for themselves what are the parameters to get in the 4 majors?
Yeah, I mean, all the rankings are created by humans. So whether it's the Sagarin rankings, or it's Data Golf, or it's the world rankings, the official world rankings, someone has to decide what's going to go into the algorithm. And there's debates, and there's public comments, and there's votes, and there's meetings. But ultimately, it comes down to humans making those decisions. And so all 3 of those rankings are different. They're each a snapshot of who's playing the best at any given moment, but they have their own biases and flaws. And so it's just because the ranking exists in one way, it doesn't mean it's the right way. It can always be tweaked and improved. In the history of the OWGRs, they're always changing it. And so maybe the pendulum swung too far and they do need to tweak it. So just because it is doesn't mean it's the right way. People kind of be like, well, it's the ranking. That's what it is. Well, it's changeable. It's fixable. It's tweakable. And so anyway, what were you going to say, Mike?
as Alan and I and others have said many times, it was a marketing ploy by a very clever man, Mark McCormick, who's the founder of IMG, to get his international players into events in the first place. Dean Beeman explained that to me the other day. So, like, we know why the American Constitution was written, and it was sound. The reason why this thing started in the first place is not sound. And then, as to Alan's point, with all, I don't know what the numbers are, but, it seems like there's 2 numbers, a dot, and then many decimal places after that. It makes it sound like it's scientific. As Alan just pointed out, there's no science behind it. And just as you can't compare Walter Johnson and Bob Gibson, you can't compare a wide open golf course somewhere in Asia with, something that they're playing, let's say Colonial with the rough up. It's folly. The whole thing is folly. And now David said half is a joke, but maybe half seriously. Just get rid of it altogether. It really does not serve a purpose. It's really just on the basis alone, it's impossible. It is impossible to rank players playing all over the world in all sorts of different conditions with different quality of fields. It's an impossible task. It's a fool's errand. And I don't really see how it's serving golf at all.
And I think that the Live PGA Tour event, and if we're getting paid by Saudi Arabia in the Live Tour, Matt's holding out checks from me. So if we got any checks from the Live Tour, Matt, I'll send my address, because everyone says we're shills. But
Ryan's eager to sell out, but there's no buyers.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with selling out. I mean, if they have Monday qualifiers and they're like 2 million, anyway. The pettiness on both sides of this fight, obviously the Live Tours, but if you're the PGA Tour and you sit on that board of the OWGR, Pelly and the PGA Tour, and can't look at that without any who you're on, what side you're on, and know that you're a biased ranking system, then we need someone else to take care of the official rankings. Like, you can't just sit on there and say, hey, here's all the people, and like they shouldn't get any. Now, what if they adjust? Are you still going to say they shouldn't get any? Because again, the pettiness makes me concerned about OWG. It makes me concerned about the future of golf in general, but just pertaining to OWGR. If you sit on the board of the OWGR and look across at the field of the Live Tour and don't think that they should, maybe they need to adjust. I'm not saying they don't need to adjust. If you look at that field and don't think there should be some way that they are included in the rankings, then I don't know what to tell you. You're not looking at it objectively. I don't like the Live Tour. I've said it many times, but they have a good field and they probably deserve some world ranking points, however that comes to be. And if you can't think that, then you're not thinking straight. Like, if you're accusing me of being a Live shill, you're being a PGA Tour shill or a whatever shill, or you hate Live shill, because I don't like Live. I despise the political. I despise the format, all that stuff. It still includes some of the best golfers in the world. There is no argument. You can't argue that. And so to say that they shouldn't get some based on that, on how many holes they play and all that, it's ridiculous.
Well, to say they can't play on the PGA Tour and you can't get points, you like, how many more? Like, and we're on the board. I'm on the board. Jay Monahan's on the board. Like, what? How many layers of like dysfunction do you have to reveal before you're like, yeah, maybe this isn't probably the right system either? You know what I mean?
I do have some reporting on this, because I was speaking on the phone with a member of the OWGR board.
Ooh.
It's the inner sanctum. They don't want their name used publicly, but this person said that despite all the mudslinging and the name calling, there's actually a lot of communication between the institution of the OWGR and Live Golf, and things are happening. And he didn't think it was going to be resolved publicly by the time of the Masters, but it sounds like shortly thereafter. I think there will be some changes, and I get the feeling it's on both from Live, but more from the OWGR and how they're going to deal with Live, and that some sort of solution is being brokered, and it sounds like the conversations are productive. And he said the institution is succeeding in that the OWGR has criteria, they have comment periods, they have conversations with many tours around the world, and there's give and take about what these tours can do to qualify. And he said it's no different. And so even though I don't think Liv wants it publicly, is that it's a closed shop and they're aligned against us and they're screwing us over, that the reality is there's a lot of communication going on, and that the OWGR is trying to find a solution. Now, this is one member of the board. But I have no reason to doubt what he's telling me, and it gives a little context to this. So we'll see how it plays out. But I don't think we're going to get to December. A year from now, I don't think we're still going to be talking about this. There will have been some sort of meeting of the minds and one step towards kind of reunifying a fractured professional game.
And that's a very big statement, Alan, because if they actually do go down that path, then that is the PGA Tour acknowledging that Live Tour is legitimate. And that's been very hard for them to say. And to Ryan's point about just how petty and crazy the whole thing is, no, this really didn't get much focus this year. But the idea that the R&A, which presents itself and its championship with a great deal of confidence, disinvited Greg Norman from its champions dinner. He is a former champion. It's won the thing twice. And now he can't come to your dinner just because you don't like what he's doing politically, and he can't play in your 4-hole exhibition. I mean, that in itself showed such an intense level of pettiness that it's Bobby Jones would be spinning in his grave. So, to the question of, what's the Masters going to do, or what's the USGA going to do? If they want to be true to their actual convictions, they have to invite anybody who qualifies. They can't possibly even think about blocking somebody because of their association with Live Tour. It's not like they're Angel Cabrera in jail. They've just decided to play professional golf elsewhere.
For a startup, to use Hudson Swafford's term, which was kind of rich. But he's like, I just changed jobs. I went to a startup. It's like, well, it's not two guys in their garage. This is a well-capitalized startup. But I agree. And we've kicked this around before. There's no way Augusta is not going to invite people who are otherwise qualified. That's not going to happen. Dustin will be there. Cam Smith will be there. Phil will be there. But where it does get interesting is if you look at the world rankings right now, there's a handful of Live guys who are in the mid 40s of the OWGR. Top 50 at the end of this year in 2 weeks get into the Masters. And Taylor Gooch is one. He's been a lightning rod all year. Kevin Na, one of the original kind of Live defectors, Brian Kokrak. There's a few guys. Harold Varner. They're hanging on by their fingernails to that top 50 spot. And how the math works out in these next couple of weeks is going to be fascinating. And so I don't think that they're obviously not headliners, but any of those guys are good enough to win a Masters if they're in the field potentially. And so if they slip out of the top 50. That's going to be a big talking point, and that will put a little pressure on the Green Jackets because they do have the ability to invite anybody they want beyond that top 50. So we'll see how that plays out. That to me is actually a really interesting piece of it. The big guys are going to be there. They've earned their right. Fred Really's not going to stand in the schoolhouse door and prevent them from coming onto the property. That's just not happening. But guys who, the Masters can always fall back and say, hey, the criteria is the criteria. We're not going to change it. Then there's going to be some live casualties, and that's a little more interesting.
A byproduct of these guys who are in their early to mid 40s who may have a hard time competing against these guys who are coming up in their early 20s and are kind of lost with trying to figure out a career path is a byproduct of the tour not moving that age from the Champions Tour from 50 down to whatever, maybe 45 or 44, and giving guys this tweener path between either staying and competing on the tour or going to what would be a Champions Tour. and not evolving with sort of the youth movement of the game. Again, it keeps layering and layering around, like, what else was Henrik Stenson or Paul Casey or Lee West? What were these guys supposed to do? Just not play for 5 years and just, pack it up? Like, again, it's just the whole thing is fascinating to me. And you world ranking, the board of the world ranking, the rules of what you can and can't do, what is ranked or not ranked, raising the price of Q School in the middle of all of this craziness that gets you onto the Corn Ferry Tour, which means to me, again, the richest kids make it and not the best kids. And then what becomes the PGA Tour 5 years, 10 years from now, if we keep making it harder, more expensive to try to make it to the tour? Like, it just, this is why I think Ryan has built such an incredible following based on his focus on what we deem dreamers, and why we're going to launch this series called The Grind, showcasing what it's like for these people out there on these, on this adventurous journey to try to make it. It all feeds down to that, right? Like that's why I say I'm not pro live. I'm sort of anti-tour. And if this disruption needed to happen, in which we're able to, pull back the cover on the control the tour has had on professional golf and the monopolistic control over professional golf, that in itself is worth rooting for to me. Media rights, the narratives. And I use that example all the time. Rex Hoggard is a really good reporter. He's a quality guy. This has nothing to do with Rex Hoggard. But on that court case in Northern California, when it was live players versus the PGA Tour, and Rex Hoggard was reporting live outside that courtroom wearing a PGA Tour logo on his shirt, that to me is a big part of the problem. And he was doing that without irony. And we were supposed to, as consumers of the news of the game on the Golf Channel, supposed to, take that in without irony or understanding of the situation is crazy to me.
Did you guys happen to see this Bob Riley from PNC Bank get on with Dan Hicks today? He was wearing a blue shirt with no logo on it. I'm like, that's a shocker. You're supposed to be selling PNC. It was kind of delightful, but I couldn't believe it.
I personally love the CEO interview. It's one of my favorite parts of every telecast. It's so cringy. And it's so bad. It's good. Like, I look forward to it.
This guy was good today.
The first company that goes, I'm not going to put just say, hey, we're going to skip the CEO interview to spare all of you. Like, it's going to be the biggest thing on Twitter ever, Be like, the CEO of PNC knows you're going to be bored shitless if he comes on here. So we're going to skip that interview and everybody's going to go, I'm switching all my money to PNC right now.
I think if the CEO came on and said, I know the last thing you want to do is hear from me, so I am going to take my microphone off. I'm going to get up off this set. I'm going to go back where I belong, which is in the corporate hospitality tent with all of my top clients. And I'm going to leave this to the professionals, and they can communicate to you how good we are at what we do and how much money we're spending to support this tour.
Did you hear Annika's PNC shout out at the end? I mean, that shows you what a hard invitation this thing is to get.
She went directly into the camera with it. She wasn't just like in passing. She was like turned to the camera and was like, "Thank you to PNC." I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh yeah, no, there was. You
can probably get into this field anytime.
There was some
Annika is one of the greats of all time. Not to take anything away from Annika, but she does have that Bernhard Langer Germanic kind of quality. Of course, she's a Swede. But when she talks about her heart doing this and the tears behind her glasses, but in that dead flat Annika way, it just actually makes me laugh.
It was the most emotional moment of my entire life.
Yeah. She said, this was really fun. Her kid's like just laughing and giggling, and she's like, it was
The kid was great.
Yeah, the kid was really
he had a lot of swag, man. He's walking in putts, wearing Jordans. I mean, shout out to Will Sorenstam, who made it fun for sure. Well,
another reason there should be an age limit on the PNC. Okay.
I support it. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, when you're a grandfather, you shouldn't be able to play with your child. Like, I mean, I don't know if Cass has any kids or not, but it's getting
that's
a little
what I'm
sussy.
Yeah.
Any board that has any input into the greater scheme of like the game of golf from a professional standpoint that doesn't have Ryan French on that board, I'm not for it anymore. I'm going to draw a hard line on if Ryan.
I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to be the guy who tells Charlie Woods he's peaked. I was like, unfortunately, Charlie, you've over the 15-year-old.
I would give you
limit.
that. I would let you have that to help make that decision. Like, you should be on the board of the OWGR as a kind of a face and a supporter of all the other tours out there, making sure, doing what, probably Keith Pelly tried to do, but probably got outvoted on the board by all the others. But I mean, I just think you got to, like, why don't we go around and collect a little bit of perspective from a variety of different entry points instead of just like the boys club that's in control of the upper echelon of golf. Like,
how is there not players on the board of the OWGR? Like, how
they're
is
a little
that possible?
biased, but yeah, it would be nice if not every important decision in golf was made in the grill room at Seminole, right?
Yeah,
we need a few different perspectives.
A little bit of,
like maybe a former
bit
player
different
could get on the OWGR. Or,
and a former player would make sense. It was like Nick Price going to the USGA, like that. I liked that. Jason Gore before him. Certainly, having guys who have been between the ropes is valuable. But I agree. Ryan French for president. I put Ryan on the Supreme Court. I mean, why stop with golf? Like, we need some Midwestern sensibilities, some down home Alpina wisdom.
And I like Mike Wan, by the way. I think Mike Wan. I have so much hope and faith in Mike Wan and what he could potentially do now that he's where he's at the USGA. I mean, I'm hoping and praying that he's going to have, Fred Perpall. There are these glimmers of hope around, and I've got a lot of respect for Seth Waugh. Come on, guys, like let's make sure that this game continues to evolve in ways that does make people feel a little uncomfortable. It's, the people who feel a little uncomfortable for where the game is going should feel a little uncomfortable. We should be comfortable in a variety of people feeling uncomfortable with the direction of the game. Otherwise, it's not going in the right direction. Mike
Wan, I agree, Matt, great. And, I saw him in a very small setting at the Symetra. What was the Symetra now? The Epson Tour Championship. 10 women got their LPGA cards and their families. There's 50 people in the room, and he made a great speech and a ton of respect. He's like, there's going to be veterans out there like Christy Kerr who, are going to squeeze you out of the range. And he's like, get your ass up there and push her to the side. Tell her you got enough. It was a very, very cool speech and ton of respect. And he went around and talked to all 10 of the girls women that had gotten their card. And it was very much like, hey, you belong. You're part of this tour too. And, I want to hear your voice as much as, I know he said what he was supposed to say, but it just felt very sincere. I was mad respect for him. And I agree in the position that he is. He seems to be outspoken and a born leader. So I hope he can say the things that some people don't want to hear.
I love that. Well, this is a busy week at the Fire Pit Collective. So just to give listeners a little rundown of what they can look forward to, Michael and I and Jeff Ogilvie taped a sort of a preview podcast about the Sandbelt Invitational, which is teeing off Sunday afternoon in the U.S., Monday morning in Melbourne. One of the really cool events in golf. I'll be writing about it every day for firepitcollective.com. We have Benny Westcott and Colt Nedler on the ground in Melbourne. They're going to be doing all kinds of cool social cuts and bringing the tournament to life. When it's over, we're going to get Jeff and hopefully the winner on for a pod. So that's happening. We have Need a Fourth, our new podcast, which launched a month ago. Hopefully y'all have been listening to that. We have a blockbuster guest for that, drops every Wednesday. Michael and I are very excited about that. It's already been taped, it's being edited, and it was a really lovely, interesting conversation. So
can I just say, guys, I hate to interrupt,
please.
But I am loving this podcast and you guys and the guests you've had on so far. Mike Mills, Michael Murphy, Brandel Chambly. I mean, everyone. I mean, it is as good as a golf podcast gets, in my opinion. Thoughtful, intelligent perspectives, plus another fourth, and the conversations that are happening and the stories that are being told. It's can't miss. It's incredible.
Well, you're nice to say that, Matt, and I really do feel that way, and I think for those who have not had a chance to hear Jeff, he is absolutely one of the most thoughtful, intelligent, insightful people in all of golf. Those who covered Jeff when he was in his playing prime would have known that for a while. But this is another chance to see just a very intelligent, thoughtful, analytical person at work, and Alan's works literally speaks for itself. So it's been great. And then just to dovetail on that one thought, we've spent a lot of this time together, and all of us who are interested in professional golf sort of consumed with the PGA Tour versus LIV. It certainly has been the biggest story of the year. But when you get to that need of fourth, it's just a welcome departure from all of that, because we're not going down that road. It's not like we're not trying to. It's just that we get somebody on there and the conversation goes where it goes. So like we had Brandel on the other day, and Brandel talked about the golf swing, because that's sort of like his entry point to the game in the first place. So it's kind of a nice break.
Yes, and accurate and a part of it. And, when I started at the Golf Channel, Kelly Tillman, Rich Lerner, and Brandel Chambly identified themselves early on as people who were willing to give me time and serve as a mentor in terms of how to do TV. Because there's not a lot of, you don't go through a training program of like, okay, this is how you do TV. They just they put a microphone on you, you put on makeup, and you're on TV. You're supposed to sort of understand what you're supposed to do, where to look. And it gets very confusing very fast. And talk about a pressure cooker. It happens when that red light goes on. And Brandel, and I've gotten to know Brandel, outside of work. Our wives are very good friends. And it was so cool to, show that side of him to more people than just the live from side of him, in which, as he says, he gets paid to sort of explain the why, and he gets paid to have an opinion on all of that. But there is this really, really cool side of Brandel that I think that's part of what got exposed in that podcast, was just his general love for the game, for the literature around the game, the study of the swing and the game, his admiration and respect for, Jeff and his place in the game. And that went both ways, and his respect and appreciation for other journalists. I mean, it's just it's a side of Brandel that not a lot of people get to see. And I hope people are able to either see or listen to that, because it's important. He's an important piece of this puzzle that makes up perspectives that talk about the game. And he is willing to say what he, feels. And it comes from well-researched, analytics or thoughts. And I just think it in that in itself is why this podcast matters. And I can't wait for this week's guest, because I know who it is, and he's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, thanks for all that. And my favorite new phrase, I was texting back and forth with Greg Norman, which will surprise some people, but and he concluded one of his texts by saying, "Thanks for being a solid part of the golf ecosystem." And it makes me laugh. It feels like a team of consultants came up with that. But Brandel is a solid part of the golf ecosystem, and it was fun to have him. And I think we can agree that Matt Ginella, Ryan French, Michael Bamberger are very solid parts of the golf ecosystem. So
not everyone will agree with that.
I'm pretty positive not everybody's going to agree with it.
Quick nod to a member, a longtime member of the golf ecosystem. Raj, the course whisperer, had his final event this week.
Oh yeah,
and he's been in our lives all our lives.
Love him.
So anyway, Yeah, he represents a nonchalance that golf needs more of.
Yes, I was gonna say I don't know if Roger's a great analyst or not. He's just fun to hang out with. Like I'm in my living room, I was actually doing a little household project, and it's just like I love to listen to Rod. It's just like it's like talking on the phone with a buddy. It's a one-way conversation. He's only talking to you, but it's sad to see him go. I'm hopefully he'll find another landing spot, but yeah, thanks for that tip of the cap, because Roger's a very solid part of the golf ecosystem, and
maybe a future need a fourth. I mean, you guys need a fourth on a regular basis. Maybe Raj will make his way into the
that's a great idea.
That
coming in smoking heaters, just dart after dart. Just
great.
Yeah, Ryan's still trying to get William Morris to sponsor Nina Fourth or the Fire Drill or something. I just don't think it's gonna happen, Ryan. I'm sorry. Right. I don't think it's Lucky.
We tried Jewel last week. Yeah,
Jewel.
Matt, what's that thing in San Francisco where they go in the tents and they go away for a while?
Huh?
It's like
Bohemian Grove. The Bohemian Grove.
I knew you'd come up with it.
Right down the street from the Alistair McKenzie Northwood Golf Course.
Okay. Well, Raj goes to that. One year he's telling me about, some musician who was in the tent next to him, and it was Bob Weir from, the Dead or something.
My dad actually, as an engineer for Bechtel Power, had a job of going in and working on the infrastructure of Bohemian Grove. He couldn't talk about it. I've got to ask him about it. My dad, like Ryan's father, has dementia, but still is able to recall in great detail some of the stories of some of the jobs he's worked on. It's a short-term memory that obviously is really, really, really troubled. But he had a very interesting time at the Bohemian Grove, and I actually got to go in one day with him as a young kid, and I can remember just the redwoods and the sort of the darkness that was created by the redwoods, and stories of guys just you can kind of pee anywhere. It's like it's quite a fraternity of stuff. God only knows what happens at the Bohemian Grove.
Well, another member of or another attendee at Bohemian Grove is Michael Murphy, a Need a Fourth podcast guest. So it all comes full circle. All right, well, let's end this fire drill. Shout out to Roger Maltby and Charlie Woods and Vijay Singh and everyone in between for enlivening this conversation. We do these every Sunday. Oh, yes, Michael?
Elin.
Oh, and yes, Elin. Easy to get sidetracked. So we do this every Sunday. Hopefully you guys have caught on to that. It's an ongoing conversation that will never end, hopefully. And we'll be back again next week. It's going to kind of be the end of the year. I think Michael and Ryan and I we've cooked up a plan to do kind of our low key year in review and talk about our favorite moments and the biggest stories. And that should be a fun one as well. So we appreciate your loyalty and fidelity as listeners. There's a lot of golf podcasts out there, but thanks for listening to ours. For Matt Ginella and Ryan French and Michael Bamberger, I'm Alan Shipnuck. This was a Fire Drill Podcast, and that's it. Thanks.